Apothecary Tales, The Tale of the Broken Bow and Silver Arrow, Part 1. The old men's eyes were wide as the town's new apothecary began to weave his first tale.
"One moment, lad,"
one of the old men interjected as he grabbed a few logs and placed them on the fire. The old men were the unofficial tenders of the hearth. This was one of those things, as these types of things often are, not something anyone can tell you how it began. It just was.
"There you go, lad. Begin as you please,"
the old man said, settling back into his chair. "Our story begins," the young apothecary began, but was abruptly cut off. "Oi, lad, let me refill my tankard," the other old man said, jumping up and scurrying to the bar. He was forward-thinking, though, and brought a pitcher so that the interruptions would be less. "Aye, lad, take her on, then," the other old man said, topping off the last of the 3 glasses. "Everyone good and settled?" asked the apothecary. The 2 men nodded, and away they went. This story is called The Tale of the Broken Bow and Silver Arrow. You see, many folks think that the town of Arshad is the furthest settlement north and west of our kingdom. It's far and secluded, and I wouldn't be surprised if I were the only person that you've met who'd actually been there in the flesh. Many think that the wild, uninhabitable frozen forest is all that lies between the town and the ice sheets. And for the most part, they would be correct. But ask the locals after a well-drunk night, and you'll hear a different tale. They will not readily tell you the story, but if you are persistent, they might tell you the very story that I'm about to tell you now. That town is made up of hardy folk who love the cold, and more than that, love the elk that wander on the edge of those harsh woods. And a generation back, the town's leader, Hothfell Hornbrook, discovered a small lake in the midst of those treacherous woods. For 4 months of the year, this lake was beautiful. In the summer, the snow gave way, even if only a little, to let flowers bloom at the water's edge. Fish could be seen swimming in the deep, crystal-clear waters, and birds would come from all over the kingdom, it seemed, to drink from this very lake. Hothfell knew that they could hunt elk, snare birds and rabbits, and catch fish in those 4 summer months and have all that they needed to survive the harsh winters. Not to mention the ice fishing that was possible even after all the other animals had flown south or gone into their winter sleep. Through what can only be described as the greatest speech in Arshadian history, old Hothfell convinced all the townsfolk to pack up and move. This was no easy feat, but he got the support of the elders and started the great task. The plans were made, and a group of 13 men packed their tools onto carts and headed the 7.5 miles into the forest to start building their new lives. They had 4 months to build as many structures as they could for the families of their small village before the cold, biting winter set in. They arrived, and it was just as Hothfell had said, flowers growing from the small patches of green that bled into the snowy surroundings. The men all shared a perfect, quiet moment of agreement. They could have never predicted the horrors that would await them. The carts were unloaded in a flat, round landing that overlooked the lake. The ground took tent spikes easy enough, but held firmly. And by mid-afternoon, a full work camp was busy and bustling, with trees being felled, planks being made, and land being leveled. They drew a crude map and charted where each family would live, as well as where the communal buildings would go. Everything was going according to plan. The men found themselves light of heart and downright giddy. They caught themselves smiling and even giggling like children on a few occasions. The place really was magical. That evening, their rest was sweeter than many had had in years. They could have not known that amidst the trees was a creature, only spoken of in old wives' tales and spook stories, watching them, smiling, a hungry grin. The apothecary sat forward in his chair and said to the old men, "Well, that's as good of a space to stop for the night as any."
What are you playing at?"
Both of the old men were furious at the idea of being caught in suspense until who knows when.
"Boy, I need you to finish this story. If you don't, I could die of curiosity."
The apothecary smiled a big grin. "Well, then you'd have to pay me to save your life. That's just smart business, my good man." The old man took a second to sort through the wit, but smirked and said,
Well, when you gonna be back in McDougal's? At least tell us that.
Come heavy snow or heavy rain, and you'll find me here at the hearth.
I will be waiting with a pint.